Hey, what is going on guys? Riot Stealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at 21 of, in my opinion, the most common mistakes that low elo players will make during the laning phase. So I did recently make a video on the 21 mistakes, just 21 general mistakes that low elo players will make, but this one is going to be more so focused on the laning phase only. So to start it off here, number one is going to be that players just don't play around their power spikes or their item spikes, and they don't respect the enemy's power spikes often enough. So the level 2 power spike is one of the most important power spikes in the game, especially for bot lane. For mid lane and for top lane it's also pretty important, but for mid and top it is more so going to depend on the matchup. For bot lane though, after you kill the first full wave and then after you kill 3 of the melee minions on the second wave, you're going to hit level 2 and you should immediately be looking to path forward, especially if you're playing an aggressive lane. If you're playing someone like a Leona support with a Lucian AD carry, when you're about to hit that level 2, start pathing forward, look to go for a level 2 all in, because if you get that level 2 all in, the lane is basically over, and low elo players they don't really play around that level 2 spike enough, and you should definitely be looking to do that more. And then as well, just try to play around your power spikes throughout the game. So for example, level 6 power spike, if you're playing a champion that has a good ultimate ability, a good CC ability at level 6, or a good damaging ability at level 6, then before you hit that point, don't look to play super aggressive. Wait to hit your power spikes to look to do stuff. Wait to hit your power spikes in order to make your move in the laning phase, because if you play around your power spikes more often, then you are going to have a lot more success. So number 2 is going to be that players just focus way too much on trying to harass in the laning phase, trying to out-trade opponents, instead of just focusing on farming. If you cannot consistently get 70 to 80 CS at 10 minutes in every game, then I would just stop focusing on harassing altogether. Try to just focus on getting CS in the laning phase, because it's just way more important than getting a little bit of harass off in lane. To put this into perspective for you, 15 CS is around equal to 1 kill. So if you're only getting like 50 CS at 10 minutes, and even if you got a kill in the laning phase, that wouldn't even be more worth it than if you're able to just get 80 CS during the laning phase in the first 10 minutes. So farm is just very, very important. Players in lower elo undervalue farm a lot, and you should definitely be looking to improve your CSing if you want to climb. So number 3 is that most players don't play around low HP minions in the laning phase, and they don't look to trade when the enemy is going into last hit, like a cannon minion, or just going into last hit any minion during the laning phase. So this is the best time for you to either look to auto attack the opponent if you're playing AD carry down in the bot lane, or if you're playing a ranged champion in the mid lane. It's a great time for you to weave in an ability, because when the enemy is going for a CS with their auto attack, they're going to be stationary for the duration of their auto attack. So this almost guarantees that you can hit your ability on the opponent, that you can get an auto attack off. So you should always be paying attention to when the enemy is going for CS, and that's the best time for you to look to trade in the laning phase. So number 4 is going to segue right off of number 3, and that is that most low elo players, they're not really going to play around enemies cooldowns as much as they should in the laning phase. If the enemy mid laner, for example, uses an ability and they completely miss you, don't just sit there in the laning phase. If you're a champion that can trade well in the early game, look to pressure the enemy mid laner after they've used an ability randomly. Players in low elo, I find, will just randomly use abilities on the wave. They'll just sit in lane and they won't get punished. So just really look to play around enemies cooldowns, and this alone is really going to help you improve your laning phase. So number 5 is going to be one that, if you did watch my other video on the 21 general tips to escape low elo, this one was in there, and it's most players just do not ward the pixel bush at 120. This is such an important ward because almost every single jungler in the game is going to be pathing down into the river, and he's going to be looking to take the scuttle crab. By getting this ward in there, it's going to give you information on where the enemy jungler is pathing in the early game, and it just allows you to really help your team out in the early game. If you see the enemy jungler path over that ward, then you could just ping the jungler out. Your laners should not die to a gank after that, and if they do, then they're just complete monkeys. So just overall, this ward is so important, and you should be looking to use it from now on. So number 6 is that most players just don't reset often enough and they stay around in lane way too long for pretty much no reason. The general number 1 rule is that if you get a kill in the laning phase, you should be looking to base pretty much every single time, unless there's like a fight that's breaking out down in the river and you know you're going to be able to win that fight, then you should be looking to base after you get a kill. If you're staying in lane after you get a kill, you're basically just throwing the lead that you've just got for yourself. Go base, grab the items, get your item advantage, and start to snowball the lane out of control. So number 7 is also kind of similar to number 6, and that is that most players just don't know when to reset during the laning phase. So the best time for you to base if the lane is even or if you're winning lane is when the cannon wave is arriving. So before the cannon wave, or the wave before the cannon wave, you should look to get a hard shove on that wave, get a hard shove, get a base in when the cannon wave is arriving, and by doing this, you're going to lose a lot less XP, you're also going to lose a lot less gold, and you might not even lose any gold or XP if you're playing against an enemy laner who can't shove in the wave super fast. But the reason that you aren't going to lose a ton of gold or XP is because it's going to take the enemy laner a lot harder to kill your cannon minion. The tower, or your tower, is also going to take a lot more tower shots to kill the cannon minion, so it's just going to give you a lot more time to get back to lane, and therefore you're not going to lose as much gold or XP. So number 8 is that most players just don't stop waves from crashing into their tower, and they don't really try to get a freeze in front of their tower when it's very easy to do so. So if you are in no danger in the laning phase and there's no way the enemy champion can look to pressure you or kill you when a wave is crashing in, then just stand in front of the wave. Don't let it crash into your tower if your wave is going to be arriving pretty quickly. So if your wave is like way off, then don't just stand in front of your tower tanking the minion aggro for a super long duration. But if you can just stand there for a few seconds and not allow that wave to crash into your tower and allow your wave to catch up and get in front of your tower, then it's going to allow you to get a nice freeze in front of your tower there. It's going to allow you to have a very nice positioning on the wave, and you're pretty much in no threat of dying if the wave is sitting in front of your tower. So I just see way too many players, they just let every single wave crash into their tower when they can very easily look to freeze it. So number 9 is a very important one, and that is that most players don't change their playstyle or their build based on the matchup. If you're in a matchup to where you just can't trade at all in the laning phase, and it's a matchup that is just very difficult to win, just focus on farm, don't focus on trading. Players will just trade no matter what and no matter the matchup, and they'll just blame it on the champion for being OP if they end up losing the trade. But in reality, if you're in a harder matchup, just don't look to trade, look to just keep up and farm during the laning phase, look to build based on the matchup. So if you're in a harder matchup, on your base, look to grab a little bit of armor or grab some magic resist. Don't just build the same thing every single game. So definitely look to adjust your playstyle based on the matchup. So number 10 is going to be more so one that's only applicable to mid lane, and that is most players don't change their position in the lane based on their wards or where the enemy jungler or where their jungler is. So for example, if you've got a pink ward in the pixel bush on top side, you should be looking to play towards that side of the map. So position yourself in lane towards the top side so that it's a lot harder for the enemy jungler to gank you. If the jungler comes from top side, you're going to see them on the pixel bush and you can back off. If they come from bot side, then you're gonna have a lot more time to react, and you're gonna be able to just run down into the top lane river, or you're gonna be able to very easily escape back to your tower. So number 11 is also one that I did feature in my previous video, and that is to just learn to get carried. Stop fighting if you're at a disadvantage in the laning phase. If you're behind in lane, just stop dying, stop the bleeding. If your teammates are winning, allow them to carry you. And if you can do this, if you cannot tilt after you die one time in the laning phase, and you can just come back to lane and stay even in CS, then you're gonna have a ton more success in solo queue. So number 12 is that most players just don't buy pink wards often enough. The general rule of thumb here is that if you're basing and if you have enough gold to grab a pink ward, then you should be looking to grab a pink on almost every single base. Unless your pink ward is in a position to where you know it's not going to be killed, then in that situation, you probably don't need to grab another one, but it's even always good to have just another pink ward in your inventory. So if that one does end up getting cleared, you have another one to place down. So if you do have the gold to do so, always be looking to grab a pink ward. So number 13 is that most players don't play around bushes in order to drop minion aggro or to hide abilities during the laning phase. For example, if you're playing top lane and you're going in for a trade, after you end up trading, don't just walk straight back into your lane. Walk into the bush if you can and just try to play around bushes during the laning phase, because dropping minion aggro by walking into a bush is just a really good way to take a lot less damage during a trade. And if the bush is not warded, then you are going to be able to drop that aggro every single time. It's also a great way to just hide abilities during the laning phase. So if you have an ability that does have a bit of an animation to it, or it does have a channel, then it's a great way for you to just sit in the bush and surprise the enemy with that ability. And this is even more important down in the bot lane in my opinion, because if you're playing an aggressive support champion like a Blitz, a Thresh, or a Nautilus, by getting bush control, it's either going to force the enemy bot lane to do one of two things. They're either going to have to ward the bush, and if they ward the bush, they're not going to have a ward for the tri-bush or for the river bush, so they're a lot more vulnerable to getting ganked, or they're going to have to play a lot less, or they're going to have to play a lot more safe in the laning phase, and they're going to have to respect the fact that you could come out of that bush at any second and surprise them with a CC ability. So if you are playing that aggressive support champion, then just really look to be controlling bushes during the laning phase. And then number 14 here has to do with the top lane and bot lane bushes as well, and you can use these bushes to help yourself set up a freeze during the laning phase. So if you do have a lead in lane, then what you can do is when the minion wave is going to be coming towards your tower, you can move in and out of the bush, and by doing this, you're going to attract the aggro. When you move back into the bush, the aggro is going to come off you and the minions are going to start going towards your tower. So I'll show this in the background gameplay here for you guys to get a little bit of a better idea, but basically it's just a really good way for you to manipulate the wave and keep it in a spot to where you want it to be. Number 15 is that most players will not back off of unfavorable waves if they're going to miss CS for it. Now this is something that's very important. If the enemy has a big minion wave building up and your wave is very small, don't stick around and just try to continue last hitting the enemy minions. Even if you're gonna miss a few CS, it's almost always better to just back off of the wave, let the wave come towards you, let the wave eventually get into a better location to where you can CS it and to where you're not in danger of getting all in by the enemy laner. Because if you're in a wave to where the enemy has more minions, chances are if they jump on you, they're gonna win that trade every single time just due to the fact that they have more minions. So you should always be looking to play around how many minions are on your side and are on the enemy side, and if you got more minions, look to play more aggressive. If the enemy has more minions, then look to back off. So number 16 is that most players just don't watch their minimap often enough. During the laning phase, as long as you're not in like a 1v1 duel, or as long as you're not in like some sort of skirmish or something, you should be looking to watch your minimap. Just give a little glance at it every 5 to 10 seconds. Also, if there's any downtime during the game, so for example, if you're basing and you're walking back to lane, always be looking at your minimap. Look to ping out where the enemy jungler is, look to ping out if your mid laner is missing. So just try to focus on watching your minimap more often. So number 17 is that most players do not focus on what their jungler is looking to do in the early game and which crab he's looking to secure. So you should always be looking at where your jungler is pathing, and if he's pathing towards the top side crab and he's looking to secure that crab, then you should be looking to try to get a shove on your wave, try to get priority and be able to roam over and help him secure the objective. Getting that crab in the early game is just so important, and if you can help your jungler do that, then it's just going to give him a really nice lead in the early game. Even if you are gonna miss like 1 or 2 CS in your lane for roaming over to help him secure the crab, it's gonna be worth it in a lot of situations. So just be focusing on what your jungler's doing and help him get that scuttle crab in the early game. So number 18 is also one that I did mention in my previous video, and that is that most players will greed for turret plating or tower damage when it doesn't really net them anything. The only times that I would recommend staying around for tower plating or turret plating in the early game is if you're going to hit an item spike by getting that turret plating, or if it's not going to lose you any tempo in the laning phase. You don't want to be staying around for turret plating if it's going to not get you a good base in the laning phase. If you stay around for the turret plating and the enemy comes back before you've even based, then you're just not really in a very good situation, because the enemy's going to be able to shove out the wave, he's going to be able to get priority and look for a roam. So you just really have to weigh out the situation and decide whether it's worth it to go for that tower damage in the early game. So number 19 is that a lot of players will use their summoner spells even if they're dead and there's no chance of them surviving. So for example, if you're getting 5-man dove bot lane, a lot of players will just use their heal to survive an extra 1 or 2 seconds, or they'll use their flash when there's no way that they're going to escape. This does come with like game knowledge and just playing more games and understanding the situation, but if you know you're going to die, just try to hold on to your summoner spells. So number 20 is that a lot of players do not use their summoner spells quick enough or even at all. A really good thing to do when you're in champion select is just take a look at what CC abilities the enemy team has. If you get hit by one CC ability, you have to ask yourself, are the enemy team, or is the enemy team going to be able to chain other CC abilities after that and be able to just chain you to death? If the answer is yes, then you need to be able to flash that first CC ability, and this is obviously going to change with every single game, and in certain games you're going to be able to hold on to your flash a little bit longer if the enemy team doesn't have as much damage or doesn't have enough crowd control. But just always be looking in champion select at what CC abilities the enemy team does have, because it's going to allow you to have a much better usage of your flash throughout the game. And then number 21 is that a lot of players will make these very high risk, low reward plays if they get a lead in the early game way too often, and it just ends up throwing their lead, and the lead that they got in the early game just doesn't even matter anymore. So if you get a lead in the laning phase, if you're up 2 kills on the opponent, then you don't really need to keep trying to go for these outplays and go for these like 50-50 1v1 duels. What you can do when you get a lead is you can just look to shove in the wave, look to help your team get vision, look to roam around the map and help snowball other lanes. And if you can just focus on making lower risk, high reward plays, then you are going to win a lot more games. So that is going to be it for this video, guys. Those were 21 different tips that should be able to help you out with your laning phase, and if you apply all of these, then your laning phase should definitely improve here for season 9. So with that being said, if you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and we'll see you in my next video.